So today we continue on our sermon series on success. Again, my name is Doug Miller, and as I like to say, I am a husband first, a father second. I'm also a psychologist in Durango here. As part of my training in psychology, I went to the Iowa School of Theology, a seminary where I initially had pursued a career in ministry. And God had led me to, after graduating from seminary, to pursue a career in psychology, to try to be able, I think, to affect people's lives in a meaningful and significant way, not only in the church, but outside of it as well. So when I was a kid, I think it became very important for me to try to find some level of success. I remember in high school, a lot of schools would have these things like the Most Likely to Succeed award. In my school, I think I really wanted to have that award, but I didn't get that one. Interestingly enough, I got the award that was called Most Likely to be a TV Evangelist. I noticed that I'm being videotaped for TV today. Maybe they were right. As we continue on our sermon series today, I want to bring your attention to the sermon notes that are in your bulletin. You're welcome to take those out. There may be some things that are discussed today that you might want to jot down on here. And then there's also a prayer and meditation moments guide that you're welcome to take with you to help you grow deeper in your relationship with Christ. When I was a child, really admired my father, a little boy who would follow his dad around the house. My dad was a physician. He wasn't really the type of dad who would take me in the backyard to throw baseball or shoot baskets, but I was invited to go with him to the hospital to round on patients on Christmas morning or on certain holidays where he may need to work. And I got to really come to admire the way in which he would love and care for his patients, really admire the way in which that they would look to him for guidance and support. I really saw my father as a tremendous role model for what I perceived as a successful man. My relationship began to blossom as I grew older, where we would participate in activities like going hiking and climbing 14ers and camping trips and going skiing in the mountains throughout Colorado. Our relationship would build to some levels of competition to see who would get down the ski slope the fastest, or we'd go on bike rides and we'd accomplish these long bike rides and see who could do it the quickest. And there was always some level of competition which would mark some significant level of success as an individual or a man. That became really that relationship with my dad became really a driving force for me in how to achieve some type of success. Even now, as a grown man, I try to make choices as a husband, as a father, as a professional, that will try to, in some way, reflect back to my dad that I am a success. It's interesting how that relationship really, for me, has tried to define what I may see as important and as successful. I wonder how you would define success. What are those things in your life that you strive for in order to feel successful? Anna Quindlen, she's the best-selling author and columnist for Newsweek magazine, states that if your success is not on your own terms, if it looks good to the world but does not feel good in your heart, it is not success at all. See, there is really no one all-encompassing definition of success, because success is really a relative concept. Success, in the action sense, is achieving something that you have set out to do or wanted to do. But what about the connection between success and happiness? What if your accomplishment doesn't really necessarily bring you much joy or happiness? Remember in 2009, my wife decided she wanted to do the Iron Horse Bicycle Classic. So this is this bike ride that you go from Durango up to Silverton, and you're trying to beat the train. Now, you're supposed to start the ride at about 8 o'clock in the morning, but my wife was nervous. She really wanted to get off early, and so we started out that morning about 6:30, probably a good hour and a half, maybe an hour or so before you're supposed to really begin. I decided to sign up for what's called the quarter horse. This is a shorter ride that you ride your bike not from to Silverton, but you ride it up to Durango Mountain Resort. So I'm riding with my wife. We leave the house very early, riding our bikes up towards the pass, and then we come to this roadblock where I can't ride anymore because I didn't sign up to do the Iron Horse. So my wife continues on up the way, and I turn into Durango Mountain Resort. where I have to finish my ride, the quarter horse. Now there's people there who have these walkie-talkies, and they're all like these officials. And I notice as I'm pulling into Durango Mountain Resort that one of them goes, "This is unbelievable. Here's our first rider of the quarter horse at this unbelievable fast time. He's pulling in. Let's see his numbers, 25, 6, 7. That's Doug Miller. Pass it up to the finish line. We got record time of Doug Miller finishing the quarter horse." And people are cheering for me in this unbelievable fast time. But you know, I started like an hour and a half early with my wife. And I'm getting cheered and like patted on the back and saying, "What a great job. You just hauled up that hill in this great time. And I made this great accomplishment." But I didn't feel very successful because I really didn't do it the way you were supposed to do it. The next day, there's a run. It's called the, I forget, the narrow gauge run. It's a 5K run, about 3.2 miles. I decided I got to do something else. I'm not really feeling quite successful. So I'm going to get up that next morning. I'm going to go do this run. So I go do this run. It's 3.2 miles. I felt really good. I thought I did a great time. I finished the race feeling strong and everything. And the next day, the results are published in the newspaper. I'm sitting there at breakfast. I'm going through the newspaper, and I tell my wife, "Hey, Kelly, it says here in the newspaper that I took second place in that race. Aren't you proud of me?" She says, "Oh, I'm so proud of you, honey. That's so great. And, that's such a wonderful thing. And I'm feeling pretty good about myself." And a little bit of time passes, and I notice my wife's looking through the newspaper, and she begins to chuckle a little bit and laugh a little bit. And I go, "What's so funny over there?" She goes, "Well, you didn't tell me that there were only 2 people in your age division in that race yesterday." I just felt like a little successful for just a little bit. But yeah, even if we accomplish something and it doesn't quite meet that joy and happiness, do we still feel successful? Some people will define success as acquiring great wealth, or holding on to a high-level position in a career, or receiving good grades, or winning the game. When we place our level of success and our self-worth on those sorts of things, something that really could be taken away so easily, we put ourselves in a bit of a precarious position. I think if we're honest with ourselves, a lot of us do put our jobs or our financial security as a very important position in our lives to help us feel successful. But I want you to take a look at this. Is my bicycle wheel. It comes off my road bike. I like using my bicycle wheel as a metaphor for how we live our lives. You see, we've got the tread of the tire that hits the road and it takes us down our path in life. Then we have these spokes. The spokes really support the wheel. You got to have the spokes on there to support the wheel so we can go down the path. But then those spokes all come to something there in the middle. In the middle is the all-important hub, this thing right here. Those spokes all come to connect in that hub. Now, if we apply this wheel as a metaphor for our life, we can think of, in order for us to travel down life, we need all sorts of spokes in our life that really will support us. And then there tends to be something very important that we place at the hub that is the one and most important thing that helps us continue down that path. Because you see, if we break a spoke on our wheel could still work. It may not be perfect, but it'll still work. But if we lose the hub, if this hub breaks and it pops out or something, the whole wheel collapses and we're not going anywhere. So the question to ask ourselves is, what is our hub? What do you place as the hub in your life? For a lot of people, it's their financial security is their hub, but that can be taken away so easily. For some people, it's their job or the position they hold at home or school, and that can be taken away so easily. Or for some, it's our relationships with our spouse or with our children, and we all know that relationships have ups and downs. They're not stable. They're always moving and changing. So what happens to your hub when you place something like that can be taken away or changed so easily as that one thing that supports your wheel through life? I wonder what would happen if we made God our hub. If you made your faith, your relationship with God, as your hub, and you allowed everything else to come out of that. Take, for example, your job. A job is a really important spoke, but it was never meant to be a hub. And what if you had your job coming out of your relationship with Christ? Or your financial security. Your financial security is a really important spoke, but it was never meant to be your hub. Or your relationships. Again, a really important spoke, but it was never meant to be your hub. So I wonder what it would be like for you if you could wake up every day and say, God, I choose to make you my hub. And what would your life look like? What would you be doing if God was your hub? Or what would you not be doing if God was your hub? See, when God is the hub of our life and everything else is connected as a spoke to that hub, I really do think that our wheel functions in a much more significant way. At work, that's again a very important spoke, but it could probably be even more significant if it comes out of that hub with God. When we put God in the center of our lives, then live from that center, it propels us down a path that becomes more consistent with important values and commitments, things that may matter more in life. And when we do that, I do think that we're destined for extraordinary things, unprecedented success, because it makes what we do matter. Soren Kierkegaard states, "What I really lack is to be clear in my mind what I am to do, not what I am to know. The thing is to understand myself, to see what God really wishes me to do, to find the idea for which I can live and die." So for Kierkegaard, I think he expresses here as a desire to find a way of living that matters, to find a valued way of living. It really stems out of questions like, who am I? What am I meant to do here? And what am I trying to do with my life? Values, as I am defining them here, have to do with a direction you take your life. It's a quality of action. By definition, values are not something that you can hold on to and achieve. Those are goals. You may have a goal to get a certain award. You can hold that award in your hand. You might have a goal to have a certain type of amount of income. You can hold that in your hand. But if you have a value of being Jesus Christ to the world, you cannot hold that, but you try to move your life in that valued direction. For me, I have a huge value of being a particular type of father for my children. Now, there are some days that I'm much better than that than others. Some days I completely fail at that. But I still hold that as a value that is the direction I try to move my life. Each person is a very unique being in this universe. There's not one other person just exactly like you. You all have unique gifts and abilities. You all have abilities that you may be very aware of. You know that they're obvious. And there may be gifts that you don't even know about yet. I truly believe that one of the most important questions that we could ask ourselves in order to move towards a life of significance, achieving some level of success, is to ask, how can I serve others? Albert Schweitzer states this, "I don't know what your destiny will be, but one thing I do know, the only ones among you who will be really happy are those who have sought and found how to serve." Now, the members of our church here are going to have an opportunity to find out that answer to that question of how can you serve. We have a team here in the church. They're called the equipping team that will give us all an opportunity to discover what our own gifts and talents are. I want to invite Susan Tate up, who's going to share with us a little bit about that. Have a seat. Susan is with the equipping team. Now, Susan, tell us a little bit about what is the equipping team.
Well, the equipping team here at the First United Methodist Church is a group that our purpose is to help identify and develop lay leadership for the church. It can be people who are interested in serving on committees, being part of missions and ministry, and it can also develop leadership for our community so that we can all step out in Christian service and continue with those values of being Jesus Christ to the world.
So the equipping team has put together a class.
We have a new class starting. There's information about it in your bulletin. It's for all of us who have been kind of questioning or working on our faith journey and wondering what might be the next step. We're not sure what the next step might really look like. And as an incredibly creative group of people, we have called this class The Next Step. It will begin on Disciple Wednesday, November 6th, and we encourage you all to come to help us discover our goals and our purposes.
Now, who's this class for? All ages or certain ages?
The class is an adult class. It will be given, as I said, on Disciple Wednesdays. It's a one-time evening, a one-time presentation, but we'll be giving it more than once. We ask you to please register. In your bulletin, there is more information on this yellow sheet about the class and a way that you can register. Registration is important so that we have enough material for everyone. Additionally, we would like participants to go online at FUMCDurango.org or to pick up a hard copy in the back of the Spiritual Gifts Survey. I think this is a great way to help us all begin thinking about what our gifts and our passions might be. We would ask you to bring the results to the class, and we'll all work together to see what is our next step.
Thank you, Susan. So I hope you all will give some real prayerful thought to that as participating in that class. And if nothing else, go online to the church's website at fumcdurango.org and complete the Spiritual Gift Survey. You may have an opportunity to really discover something about yourself and also come to understand what your gifts and talents are that God really has given you in a way that you may be called to use to serve others. Our scripture today comes from Proverbs 16:3. In that it states, "Commit your actions to the Lord, and your plans will succeed." Now, most of us are pretty vulnerable as we're trying to reach some level of success, to being very outcome-oriented, and that we forget that success is a journey and not a destination, that we tend to always compare ourselves to how we're doing right now in this moment and compare that to how somebody else is doing. We're constantly trying to imagine achieving some better state of mind that we may be in right now and trying to get to someplace better than where we're at. Consequently, many potentially invigorating life initiatives, many opportunities that could touch the lives of other people, tend to be stopped short because the outcome is not delivered on schedule. Taking a life direction, taking your life in a direction that has some value and significance, means that we can't look at how we're doing right here in this moment, but rather look at the big picture of the major big direction in which we're choosing to take our life. I'm sure many people in this room have gone for a hike. Imagine yourself hiking up a steep mountain, a steep climb in which the trail makes its way back and forth on switchbacks. There may be parts of the trail in which the trail might dip down beneath where you've already climbed. That happens a lot on steep hikes that we may do in these mountains surrounding us. Now, if you're on this hike and you're climbing to this top of some mountain, and I come to you and ask, how are you doing right now in this moment? And you're on some switchback where you're actually coming back a direction you've already come, you're probably going to tell me things aren't going very well. Or I ask you, how are you doing right now? And you notice that the trail has climbed up but then dropped down into a valley. You would say you feel like you're a major failure. Things are not going very well. Or if you're on a part of the trail where it's open and you can see how that trail leads right up to the top of the mountain you're climbing, you'd probably tell me things are looking really good. But if you and I went across the valley and we had a pair of binoculars and we could look across that valley at other people climbing that mountain, every time we asked how they're doing, we would know that they were doing great. Because we could see how every step they're taking, regardless of whether they're on the switchbacks or the trail is dipping down low, from our perspective, we'd be able to see where that trail ultimately leads. So when you choose to move your life in a valued direction, it's important to recognize that the path is going to be windy. The path is going to have ups and downs. And we might just all feel a lot better if we could see the following this crazy winding trail is exactly what leads us to the top. One way in which I try to make God the hub of my wheel every day is that I start the day with some time of prayer. There's books like the Upper Room or the Daily Word, or this one that's called Jesus Calling. I thought I start every morning by reading Jesus Calling. And I thought it was interesting that just for today, this is what I read. As you become increasingly aware of my presence, you find it easier to discern the way you should go. This is one of the practical benefits of living close to me. Instead of wandering about what is on the road ahead or worrying about what you should do if or when, you can concentrate on staying in communication with me. When you actually arrive at a choice point, I will show you which direction to go. Many people are so preoccupied with future plans and decisions that they fail to see choices they need to make today. Without any conscious awareness, they make their habitual responses. People who live this way find a dullness creeping into their lives. They sleepwalk through their days, following well-worn paths of routine. I, the creator of the universe, am the most creative being imaginable. I will not leave you circling in deeply rutted paths. Instead, I will lead you along fresh trails of adventure, revealing to you things you did not know. Stay in communication with me. Follow my guiding presence. In 1 Samuel, chapter 17, reread that story of David and Goliath. Many of us heard that story as a child. And I keep thinking it's a very significant story for us to remember as adults. The story of David and Goliath, David is a boy. He shows up at this camp where these people are faced to have this great battle with this Philistine Goliath who challenges anybody to fight him. But he's this large, enormous being of a man. And everybody's too scared or frightened to fight him. David shows up at this camp and says, "I'll do it." And everybody starts telling him, "You're crazy. You're just a boy. You're too small. You can't beat this giant." And David insists that he knows he can do it. In his faith, he knows he can do it. And in chapters 37 through 40, we read this, that Saul, the king, finally consented. "All right, go ahead," he said, "and may the Lord be with you." Then Saul gave David his own armor, a bronze helmet, and a coat of mail. David put it on, strapped a sword over it, and took a step or two to see what it was like, for he had never worn such things before. "I can't go in these," he protested to Saul. "I'm not used to them." So David took them off again. He picked up the 5 smooth stones from a stream and put them into a shepherd's bag. Then, armed only with the shepherd's staff and sling, he started across the valley to fight the Philistine. See, for me, I think it's interesting to read that David, this boy, is being told that he can't do something, and he insists in his faith that he knows he can. And then finally, the king says, "All right, I'll give you the blessing to go fight to this major giant. But this is what you need to be successful. Put on all my armor and take my sword, and this is how you'll be successful." And David insists, "I'm not used to this. This is not my strength. This is not what I'm good at. What I am good at is with a sling and a stone." He understood his strengths and his weaknesses. He wasn't trying to be somebody he wasn't. He knew that he could succeed with a sling and a stone. Now, that might not be the way other people could be successful, but he understood in his faith that it was how he could be successful. See, don't we every day get lessons and told by people all around us what we need to be successful? Isn't everybody else trying to tell us what we need to wear, or what we need to drive, or what we need to do, or to be good enough, or whatever, to be successful? And yet, if we can just come to accept ourselves enough to recognize that we can't and don't need to be what everybody thinks we need to be, that we have our own strengths, our own weaknesses, the things that we know we're good at, and the things we understand that we're not so good at, we'll leave that up to somebody else. And we use our strengths in a way that can make a powerful difference in the lives of other people. That, I think, is an important lesson for us all to understand. That despite the fact we're going to hear from everybody else what they think we need to be successful, pay attention that God has given you gifts and talents that are yours and yours alone, that you can use to be successful. I think that when we do that, we not only find ourselves to be one of the happy ones, as Schweitzer says, but we also can find ourselves experiencing real joy. For one of my favorite quotes is that happiness comes from getting what you want, and joy comes from being who you truly are. Now there is a difference between making a decision to do something based on a feeling and making a decision to do something based on a choice, particularly a choice consistent with what matters to you and consistent with who you truly are. See, we can choose our values and commitments. When we base decisions on feelings, we know that feelings change. They come and they go. And when those feelings change, our willingness to stay on course to a decision can weaken. But when we make a decision based on a choice, that choice allows us to maintain a fixed course, regardless of whatever thoughts and feelings that may be coming our way. See, I want you to imagine that you're driving a bus. You're driving a school bus, okay? A school bus that's driving down this highway of life. And on that bus, there's a whole bunch of passengers. Now, there may be passengers on that bus that are really nice and friendly, but there's also some passengers on that bus that aren't so friendly. And those are the ones that we want to pay attention to. Those are the ones we're going to talk about now, because those are the ones that tend to cause us a lot of problems in our lives. So you're driving this bus down the highway of life, and then you're presented with an opportunity. God presents us with opportunities all the time. And you come to this fork in the road, and this fork in the road presents you an opportunity to make a choice consistent with a value of yours, a value of life. Let's say the value is being Jesus Christ to the world. So there's a sign that points left, and you could turn left, and that's going to move you in a direction that's consistent with being Jesus Christ to the world. And then there's a sign pointing to the right that says doing something else. Now, what's interesting is if you choose to turn left and you want to make that choice to do something consistent with being Jesus Christ to the world, these passengers that are the mean ones, they don't like that so much. They begin to speak up and start saying, "What are you doing? This is crazy. You're going to get us lost. You don't know what you're doing. You're not smart enough. This is the craziest thing. You're going to be such a failure." And all of those passengers start speaking up like that as you are trying to make this choice to move down this valued direction of your life. Now, I see you have three choices here on how to respond to this. You could choose to keep moving down that path that's consistent with what matters to you, and recognize that those passengers are along for the ride. Would it be worth it to you to keep moving your life in that direction that matters to you and know that those passengers are just going to be there? Option 2, I suppose, is that you could pull your bus over to the side of the road. And you could try to reason with these passengers. Tell them to please calm down, please be quiet. I'm trying to drive here. You may even try to push them off the bus, but you know there's a whole heck of a lot more passengers on their side, and it's just you. So maybe you can try this. You guys quiet down. Nobody's going anywhere until you all just quiet down and stop. Well, what if they never quiet down? Look who's really in charge of whether you get to keep driving or not. It's those passengers. What if they never quiet down and you find yourself stuck on the side of the highway of life, not going anywhere? Option 3, I suppose, is that you could backtrack and you could turn right, where you don't do what's consistent with being Jesus Christ of the world. You can go do something else. Now, I promise you, those passengers will quiet down. You won't hear them, and they'll be quiet for probably a little bit, and you'll have a little bit of respite from that. And would that be worth it? Would that be worth it to you to have them quiet down but then think about what you're giving up? You'd be giving up living your life in a direction that is meaningful to you, all just to avoid some thoughts and feelings that you don't like. One of my favorite quotes is, 100 years from now, it will not matter what my bank account was, the sort of house I lived in, or the kind of car I drove. But the world may be different because I was important in the life of a child. I love being a dad. I have 3 biological kids. I have a wonderful wife. I think my wife and I make great parents. And the only way that I can be the type of dad that I want to be for my kids is because I have my wife there to help me. We make good parents together. I feel very blessed to be living in Durango and have the life that I have. And despite all those things, I found myself a few years ago looking around and going, so this is my life. I think I want more. And I began to pray to God, saying things like, I'm ready to do something. I want to do something big, God. Use me. Do something big. And I'm driving down that highway of life, and I'm presented with a fork in the road that presents this idea of adopting a child. That if you love being a father so much, how about being a dad for a child who doesn't have one? I said, God, I want to do something big, but I don't want to do something crazy. I'm going to keep driving. And I come to this fork in the road again. Keep getting these thoughts, these little nudges. Maybe you know what I'm talking about. You get like this little nudge encouraging you to do something. You think, that's crazy. But this idea of adopting the child from Africa keeps showing up. A child from Africa, I have no connection with Africa, but this child is a child of God who doesn't have a father, who doesn't have a mother, who's just an orphan child. And if you love being a father so much, how about being one for a child who doesn't have a father? So, I put God at the hub of my wheel. I really want to live my life this way, not just talk about it. And I got to step out into the unknown here. I'm going to adopt a child from the Democratic Republic of Congo in Africa, the most unstable country in the world. The only thing I know about the Congo are things like Ebola virus comes from there. Yikes. But okay, I'm stepping out into the unknown. I begin to hear those thoughts and feelings of like, this is crazy. This could really affect your biological children's lives. My family is saying, why can't you just put money towards building send some money to a child there. You don't have to actually adopt this child. No, this is completely irrational. And I'm doing it anyway. So, in March, my wife and I, finally, after about an 18-month journey of ups and downs and a winding trail where it felt like success and failures and completely have no control over this process, we travel to the Democratic Republic of Congo, and we meet our boy, the child that God has brought to us, Mason. Mason Jean-Marie. There you see a picture of us when we just returned home from the Congo. That's at the airport here in Durango. Our son Corbin, our daughter Hannah, our daughter Emmy are seeing Mason there for the first time. And I often wondered, what is this going to do to my other kids? It's done amazing things for them. It's opened their eyes to understanding that the world and life is not just about them. I've asked myself before we got Mason, could I possibly love an adopted child as much as I love my own biological children? And I tell you, the moment when you put that little boy in your arms, you can. The love is there. It is there. I love this boy just like I love all of my kids, especially when I lie down with him at night and I'm reading him a book, and then we cuddle and I rub his back, and he says really quietly, I love you, Daddy. He wouldn't have that unless I took that risk. In September, I went on a men's retreat through the church. And out of that men's retreat, I had an opportunity to meet with a lot of men who decided we wanted to meet together more regularly. We get up super early on a weekday morning and we come together, making choices and supporting one another to not just strive for success, but to live a life of significance as husbands, as fathers, as men in our community. In our Bible study, we're reading the Tony Dungy book, Quiet Strength. In that, there's a Bible study in which he really emphasizes the importance. If you want to move your life in a direction that matters, then you surround yourself with people who can support you in that way too. You find people in your life who have similar values. You find people who can really support you and challenge you to make the decisions consistent with a life that doesn't just focus on the worldly ideas of success, but focuses on what God may define as success. Because you see, there's competing views of success in our world, where the world often will say that success comes from our accomplishments and our awards and our material possessions and profit margins. But God's Word presents a different definition of success, one that is centered on a relationship with Jesus Christ and a love of God that allows us to love and serve others. Now, we might get caught up in chasing all the worldly views of success, and we could probably end up doing some really great things in this world. But when we're no longer here, we're no longer walking this earth, what will it all mean? If you look at your life, if you died today, what would people remember you for? Were people's lives better because you were a part of it? Did you truly make a difference in the lives of other people? There are two things that I'd like you to think of doing this week, and it comes out of Tony Dungy's book here, Quiet Strength. that I want you to think of, number one, that an important aspect of success is letting go of goals, expectations, and activities that distract us from what really matters. And I want you to ask God to show you one thing in your life that may be getting in the way of God's definition of success for you, and then let it go. Second, I want you to ask God to show you one area of your life that needs a new definition of success, and share this new definition of success with someone close to you, and ask that person to really support you in making choices that will move your life in a way that's consistent with that new definition of success, in a life that matters, in a life of significance. When I returned back from Africa in March with my wife Kelly, I really wanted to get Mason home to Colorado Springs, where I grew up, to meet my mom and my dad, particularly my father. You see, my dad, as I mentioned, is a majorly important figure in my life. And I was really worried about my dad's health. So my dad is a healthy guy. He ran 6 miles every day, never smoked. But the way life happens, sometimes really unfair things occur, and he got a bizarre cancer that showed up in his sinus, of all places. The cancer had migrated into his brain and into his lungs, and making it incredibly difficult for him to breathe. I really didn't know how much time was left in my father's life. Everybody seemed to think his life was coming to an end, but he didn't. He was always the positive one, insisting that he was going to beat this thing. And I was concerned that I wasn't going to have an opportunity for Mason to meet my father, or for my father to meet Mason. So I drove my whole family up to Colorado Springs about 3 weeks after we returned from Africa to meet my dad. And that cancer had migrated into his lungs in such a way that it was very difficult for him to breathe. It was particularly hard for him to breathe when he would transition from standing up to sitting down, or to lying down. And this particular Friday, he went to go lie down in bed, and he had a hard time breathing. And when he couldn't breathe, you could see my father panic. He would get a panic look on his face, and he's trying to catch his breath, but it was so hard for him. It was agonizing for us all to see. And I was there in his bedroom with him as he was trying to get in his bed, and was panicking, and I was trying to think of what could I do to help my dad. Now, what was interesting is I'm a psychologist, and my dad is a medical doctor. My dad knows how to heal people medically, and he never quite understood what it is that I do as a psychologist, helping people at times of difficulty to transition from a hard place to a more peaceful place. But my dad was in a hard place. He couldn't breathe and was panicking. And I asked my dad to close his eyes. Dad, close your eyes. Just close your eyes and just take yourself to a place where you feel the most peaceful, the closest to God, the most calm and serene place you can think of. Just allow yourself to go there and close your eyes and take it all in. And my dad would close his eyes, and you could see his breathing begin to slow down a little bit, and he's calming down. He's relaxing. His eyes are closed. And then he opens his eyes. I said, Dad, where did you go? Where's that place that you feel the most peaceful, the most serene? I'm thinking it's going to be a beach somewhere, or some high mountain spot. And he says, skiing the powder and the bugaboos in Canada. That's where my father felt the most peace, the closest to God. That was his place to help him calm and feel serene. About 5 days later, I'm back here in Durango, and I call my mom to see how my dad's doing. She says, not so well. He had a seizure last night, and I can't take care of him anymore. We had to put him in the inpatient hospice at the hospital here in Penrose in Colorado Springs. And you get that little nudge from God that says, it's time. Get in the car. Drive home. Okay, it's time. It was snowing that day in April. I get behind some snowplow that allows me to drive over these mountain passes that end up getting closed. My mom and my aunt and my uncle are there. They call me as I'm approaching Colorado Springs and say, we've been here all day with Dad. He's doing fine. He's just been the way he's been all day. We're going to go home and have some dinner. Why don't you join us? I said, no, I want to go see Dad. I pull into the parking lot at the hospital, and I walk in, and I head to the restroom to splash some water on my face, and I say a prayer that I often say to please God, bring your peace to my mind and your love to my heart. And God be with me. I put God at that hub. I don't know what I'm going into, but I walk into that room of my dad's hospital. He's in there all by himself, and he looks like he's all tense because he had this seizure and he hadn't calmed down since, and he was struggling to breathe. He wasn't conscious. His eyes were closed. And I just began to talk to him, hold his hand and say, Dad, I'm here. I tell him things that I need to tell him as a son to his dad. A hospice nurse walks in at this time, and she goes, he must have been waiting for you because he hasn't changed at all day until right now. She leaves the room, and I'm just holding my dad's hand, and I wonder, Dad, I wonder where you're at. I wonder what's going on. And I realize, I know where you're at. Dad, let's go ski down the Bugaboos in Canada. So we turn down the slope. Feel the powder bellow against your chest, Dad. Take those face shots, you know? Take it all in and allow your body just to float in the powder, in the Bugaboos. As I'm telling him, I see my dad's breathing not be so strained anymore, and he begins to slowly calm down. As I describe him floating in the powder of the Bugaboos, taking those space shots, the powder bellowing off his chest, he and I ski in that run together, and we come to the end, and his breathing stops. I helped my dad transition from life to death. That's what God wanted me to do. What are your gifts, your talents, your abilities, that if you hand them over to God, that He may put them to good use to help those that you care about the most and those that you live with every day? Let us pray.